a little interlude of reflections out of the blue. Um, so, in a way, what Zizek is referring to as the real utopia is inside part of Martin Heidegger's vision, in the sense that Zizek ascribes to the most powerful and prevailing view, the neoliberal view. Let's say the strongest anchor for that would be, for a test that anybody can test themselves with, go out and see concerning yourself and others, whether it's admitted that the sciences or science can or cannot determine values. Can it discover values? Put another way, can it tell us about our political choices at the highest level? Especially where values is understood to mean something on the order of agathon, or the good in Plato's terms, in Socrates' terms, or terms of similar stature, such as justice, such as beauty, such as truth, such as knowledge, such as courage. And then in the Catholic time, with the theological virtues, let's say. In this sense, all these things represent the most conservative position. This is what human beings know. This is their knowledge somehow in this level, Joseph Campbell sense. I have a high regard for Joseph Campbell. I'm saying this is a very powerful view, and I'm going to say in a way a very authoritative view, in this sense that authority and beauty, in a sense, go together. That we, for instance, Heidegger's word at the beginning of the essay, the famous essay on the work of art, where he says this thing which transfixes most who read it, where he's speaking of, he gives three examples, I think, of an artist, some painting on burlap by Paul Klee or so, saying, if it were here before us, even though we don't find it immediately intelligible, we would want to look at it for a long while. If Trackle, the poet, were here reciting a poem, we would want to hear it more than once or even often, although we would not find it intelligible. And the same for the most advanced theories of Heisenberg, of Feynman, or whomsoever is the most advanced physicist now living, or to be given expression to in our presence, though we could not follow the sense of it, though it remained unintelligible to us. In this sense, the beauty that captures us in this is a clearing through which we step, as it were, not even as the autonomous one, as the Kantian who lays down their own law and follows their own law through the spontaneous unfolding of the being of beings, taken as the answer to the question of Kant's categorical imperative within the heart of the suke, within nous, then expressed spontaneously through the will in daily life. In this sense, even this whole movement that I just described in the autonomous or spontaneous support of life through, let's say, faith, through the seeing which causes belief, of this spontaneous source. All this, in Heidegger's sense of we're clearing, is this immediate movement into the unintelligible is challenged. Heidegger seems to be saying there's something that challenges us forth, which is outside the rung of this circuit of nous, or the higher part of the human psyche, our life, understood as in a kind of maybe a figure eight infinity motion with inner and outer forces. Okay, so then understanding the various views that are available as more or less solid, hard-headed, or conservative, as against the Nietzschean. Let's understand them against the Nietzschean view. So Zizek says, for instance, speaking of Hegel, he gives this example of a so-called concrete universal. And what he wants to say is every universal is housed in some particular actual situation which comes forth. And he gives the example of Salman Rushdie, the writer from Mumbai, from India, who, this was many years ago, like we're talking about the 80s or so, I think. He was asked, why aren't you more authentically Indian? Why aren't you reading the great Indian text? And I don't know, maybe they wanted him to read the Vedas or whatever. And he said, Zizek sort of throws up his hands in egotistical self-praise at overcoming this supposed stereotype, which is actually, in actual fact, of course, we're talking about like 40 years ago. So, of course, it's already appears to be on the wrong side of history by this time. But, he congratulates himself then by saying, no, instead, Salman Rushdie said, the writers that had the most piercing power, the most indefinable sentience within them, from my point of view, were the Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. And then the thing is that the particularity of the situation in England in the time of Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or whatever was shown to be universal because it also obtained in the years of the youth of Salman Rushdie in Bombay, where he lived amongst this sort of aristocratic cutout of the general population, similar to that of the Jane Austen situation, with I guess you'd say, with the racial hierarchy and so forth. And then at the same time, the Dickensian side of the slums and so forth. So, so in this sense, the Nietzschean thing is saying it seems like there's a universal where there's a few points that touch, and even wherever it happens, they still obtain in the same world, as it were. But the point of the historical consciousness, which is at the heart of Nietzsche's thinking, this hyper-awareness of the historical consciousness, which then challenges the Platonic ideas, is there's no single point such as rich and poor that can obtain forever. So like Aristotle says, wherever you find a city, wherever you find a country, there's always rich and poor. I heard a Chinese who was not a cosmopolitan Chinese, but more of a regular Chinese say, there will always be rich and poor, in tones which were slightly different than the way Europeans state such things, but he took it as just very straightforward. He wasn't boasting that he was cleverer than other people for coming out with that view. I think this is a deep set view, but is it really true? So then Nietzsche always takes the view from the long run. When you look at it from the long run, probably it's very simple to, at least as far as intelligibility rather than tractability or logistics, whether it can be done or not, it's very simple to imagine something like the Star Trek world or whatnot. Which, by the way, I'd say that's sort of a little thing that catches you in Zizek's phrases. Zizek usually phrases things on the side of sort of like, can it be done in the sense that I can pick up a cup of coffee and drink it? Can it be imagined? He even says, can capitalism be imagined in the sense like it's not that he really means can it be imagined in the sense as it is intelligible, although he pushes it, he acts as though he means that because he says even the movies don't show it, which is false because there's quite a few movies that show general wealth in the future, although they usually have some dark side coming out along some other trajectory beside from the tension between rich and poor. But such as the human ego, or such as envy at all levels. But so if these states, the simple states, aren't eternal, because society can change that radically, which actually it already has, because rich and poor were not in the most simple caveman societies. There may have been a hierarchy. There may have been the Freudian figure of the authoritarian father, or however he's called, the horde father, or the whatever the designation is. But that's not a matter of economic classes in the same sense. So far as you make a distinction somehow between the hierarchy that maintains in a society of jackals or a society of some other herd animal, and economic distinctions of that nature, then you have to conclude that you do break or sort of, as it were, snap the chain of that idea, or break the sphere of that idea. But if the basic ideas can be broken out of like that, so they don't always obtain, so therefore the universal is only sort of the saying of, in Zizek's sense, in what he interprets to be the Hegelian sense, this is then just the current horizon. It's just under these circumstances, this is universal, but it's just the bound, or the farthest most point of the frontier, as it were, which would still slip out and change. In this sense, as soon as you get to that point, you have the possibility of thinking in Nietzsche in terms of just ultimate ideas, of no ideas. There's no position which can be forever compared to the other positions. Therefore, there's no permanent intelligibility, and everything becomes a sluice of, I don't know, the blood of your worst childhood nightmares mixing with what you actually have to live with. So in this sense, the Heideggerian position kind of, in a way, it wards off the Nietzscheanism. It says maybe the Nietzscheism is true, but I'm still staying with this position of how it looks as it's flowing by. So then he clamps down on, for instance, these positions where he's just saying actuality, which is to say the key of practicality. Like we say, if you do something like rip up your or throw your ID or your wallet in the trash or something, or out the car window or something, this is not a practical act, right? The word practical implies something good. So in the same way, Heidegger sometimes uses the word actual, like ergon, energia, the actual, to mean already what we're taking to be practical, because we're inheriting the past. We're living still through the past. And then Nietzsche says, and then Heidegger says, who can doubt that Nietzsche was right when he predicted that Heidegger speaking like right in the midst of World War II, that the soldier and the worker will be the most important figures of actuality in our time, in contradiction to the earlier time when there were peasants, farmers, aristocrats, higher clergy, whoever, different positions. So in this sense, Heidegger is conservative in that he remains within this island, within the fog where sort of Nietzsche and the ideas are floating away due to the historical consciousness. And he opens up